Hey everybody, welcome to your horoscopes for the week. These are the horoscopes for the week ending March 25th. Almost the last week of March already. We're just trekking along and things are actually looking pretty good this week. There's a couple of challenges, but not a lot of major stuff, which is good. Big news, of course, being that we are going to end Pisces season and we're going to begin, of course, with Aries season. And we're also going to have an equinox and it's turning into spring. If you're in the northern hemisphere, it's turning into fall. If you're in the southern hemisphere, either way, those are really my favorite seasons because it's that transition between the extremes of the solstice weathers kind of a thing. So it's nice to just get a little break and then be able to enjoy the outdoors regardless of which side you're on. We're going to go ahead and jump right on into it. We're going to start, as we always do, with Aries. We are going to start with Aries season. Woohoo! As Pisces season comes to a close, we begin Aries season and the whole cycle starts all over again. I see, of course, party time. As you Rams really do love to party it up. Just make sure that you party it up safely and get home safely so that you can party it up again next week. That really is the goal. We also have Mercury moving into your sign as well. Little bit of a difficulty at the beginning of the week as Mercury and the Sun are moving into Aries. They're moving into Aries square with Mars. And while the Sun and Mercury are focused on career and your career goals, and you're like, heck yeah, let's do this. I'm ready. It's my personal new year. Let's go. Mars influence on your trauma space, your internal closet, as I like to call it, might be bringing up some old anger there. And that's always something that's going to trip you up. I mean, every Aries that I've ever known doesn't necessarily always react well to old anger. That doesn't mean that you can't change that pattern now. And this really is why this is coming up, especially with it being focused around your career. The last thing you want to do is allow triggers to show a side of you that you really don't want to show in this particular instance. So I sort of see this as an opportunity for these things to come up, but for you to be able to find a way of working through the trigger without it necessarily getting in the way of what your career goals are. And you definitely don't want to run the risk of communicating in a way that's going to make people get the wrong impression of you, honestly. We all know that Aries has a little bit of anger in there, but that doesn't mean that you walk around and show it to everybody. Usually you guys are pretty laid back, and that's really the face that you want to show in this particular situation. And a professionalism also is really important in this as well. As we move into the week, Tuesday, the moon moves into your sign, new moon in Aries, actually right on the cusp of Aries and Pisces. What's been very interesting this year, and I think it continues into next month, is that all the new moons are on cusps. They're on both sides. So we have 4 new moons at the beginning of the year that are influenced by 2 different signs, which the reason why this is interesting to me is I feel with new moon energy, there's a lot of new beginning magic. And when you're adding double elements into that, it creates a very powerful manifestation if you choose to use it that way. So to kick off Aries season with a new moon in Aries, bring in that little bit of element of Pisces in there, and that little bit of allowing things to flow just sort of opens up and creates this awesome space for career opportunity and advancement, which is awesome. Although we do continue to have that square with Mars. But again, this is a learning opportunity. And even when things get really, really tense and emotional, it's up to you to stay focused, and it's up to you to stay cool, and it's up to you to keep your eye on the prize no matter what, and don't be distracted. It's so easy to get distracted. Just don't get distracted. You have plenty of time for distractions later on. So I'm really excited for you guys, and have a great week with that. Moving on to Taurus, focus is on those that support you this week. We continue to have Uranus very much taking a prominent role in Taurus. We also have Venus, which just moved on into Taurus last week, which is brilliant. And then, of course, we're going to round off the end of the week with the moon coming into your sign. Now, there's been a lot of planet interaction that has been very difficult and has produced a lot of challenges. So to hear that there's so many planets moving in, especially very emotional planets, can be a little bit tricky. But the good news is that Uranus and Venus are not interacting with any planets at all. They're just there to influence you, which I think is fantastic. Mercury is Taurus's ruling planet, and there's a particular power that comes out of a planet in its ruling sign. It's almost like it amplifies the energy of the planet a little bit. And when we're talking about Venus, we're talking about love, we're talking about beauty, we're talking about creativity, we're talking about everything that's beautiful in the world, really, and really creating or getting creative in terms of finding the support that you need. A lot of times we look for support just, in our enclosed space, our little enclosed area, and we're just not finding it. And a lot of times it's not that these people don't want to be supportive, they just don't really understand 100% what it is that you need and how to give that to you. And that's why it's really important for us to do things like therapy and sort of look outside the box for that support system. And a lot of times it's also really important, it has to be said, it's also really important that we get an outside view of what we're doing rather than asking the opinion of somebody that could be directly affected by the decision that you're making. There's obviously going to be personal interest influence in the answer to that question. So I really feel that the two planets working together as they start to move into conjunction with each other, this is going to get much, much stronger, probably into next week, specifically where we're really focusing on amplifying this in this creative and very unique way of gathering this tribe of people together. And that's the word that is actually coming to me, is the word tribe. It's to me, a very taboo word because a lot of people have used it over the years. So I tend not to use it, but I'm being told that it is necessary in this particular space. So your tribe is building, and as you pay attention to the clues that your guides are giving you that will show you the directions to go in to get this particular type of support, it becomes very successful as you sort of build that support system. And I think there's going to be parts of that support system that you really didn't think would be necessary, if that makes sense. So there's some surprises there too, which is good. As we round off the end of the week with the moon coming into your sign on Thursday, the moon does come in and with a little bit of a square with Pluto, just a little bit of a challenge there, just for that one day. Pluto's focus is very much on money, on finances. And so that is one of those things that we need a lot of support for, is financial support, not just in terms of having somebody else making money, financial support, but making sure that you have the right people around to help support you in terms of what to do with that money after you make it, or where to invest that money. There's a million money questions that come up. So I really feel that what is actually playing out of this particular scenario is that you want to make sure that you're not allowing your worry to control what you're doing with your money. I feel that that's really important. When you get really emotional about money, you tend to make bad decisions. Not you personally, of course. Everybody tends to make bad decisions when they get really emotional about money. So if you find yourself in this specific place, you're going to have to take yourself out of it in order to make sure that you make an educated decision. The good news is the moon's grand sextile with Mars as well as Saturn. Now, a grand sextile is actually a very helpful aspect. So all three planets are coming together in a very helpful way. With the moon continuing to focus on support, Mars is focused on our trauma closet, our inner trauma place. So we're talking bringing up anger from maybe in some cases very deep, very, very, very deep and buried places, which doesn't seem very helpful. But if we bounce over to Saturn, and Saturn's focus is on your long-term goals, it is helpful, really. I mean, when you think about it, if you've got fears that are based in something that happened to you a long time ago that are stopping you from moving forward, then yes, it's very helpful to bring that up and release it and kind of let it go and say, okay, I'm going to do this despite what happened last time. What happened last time isn't controlling my actions anymore. So in a way, it does provide you, and actually that square with Pluto kind of shows us what is going to come of this, right? You have an emotional reaction to something financial that triggers something in the past that has to do with old anger that comes up. Then you can focus on where you want to go from here, kind of a thing, without that thing hanging you up. So uncomfortable, a little bit messy, yes, of course it is, but once it's done, it's not a problem anymore. And when it's not a problem anymore, it's not stopping you from maybe doing things that you would love to have done a year ago, but just couldn't bring yourself to do it. So that's what I have for you guys this week. And we're moving on to Gemini. We continue to have Mars in Gemini. It is almost out of there, I swear. It's almost out of there. 29 degrees, actually. At the end of the week, we go 0 degrees. So this is the last week of Mars being in Pisces, or I'm sorry, in Gemini, which is nice. I mean, honestly, it's always nice to have a planet in your sign when they've been sticking around for a while and went retrograde and just feel like they've been there forever. It gets old pretty quick. I get it. Trust me, I get it. And this one has been pretty heavy, specifically because Mars is continuing to focus on that trauma closet. So we've had literally a month of bringing up this old anger, which is just, all of these different things triggering current anger from past anger, and it's exhausting. It sounds absolutely exhausting. Trust me, I've been through it, so I understand. It is absolutely exhausting, and it feels like you're never going to get away from it. The good news is that next week you are going to get away from it. And you have to give yourself a pat on the back, because I think that, in all honesty, going through something like this and having a very heavy load of lessons is always difficult. And you should pat yourself on the back, because you guys have done an absolutely great job in getting through it. And now comes a little bit of peace. There'll probably be a week where it just feels like it's kind of hanging on, and then it starts to move away, and you're going to start to feel that peace again. Things are going to run a little bit more smoothly for a minute, of course, because you know how that works. It always changes. Mars squares with Neptune as well as the sun, specifically at the beginning of the week. Will continue to be squared with the sun up until actually through the rest of the week, to be honest with you. Mercury will join that square at the beginning of the week also. All three of these planets are focused on career and your career goals. So if your old anger is getting in the way of that, this is a really good opportunity for you to understand why this old anger is influencing how you feel about a situation currently right now. A lot of times it has to do with different situations, being laid off unfairly, not being understood, coming up with an idea and having somebody else come up with the same idea and steal it from you and get all the credit. We go through all of these different bad things that take place, at the workplace. And when we are faced with the same situation, we tend to overreact to it a little bit because we're being influenced by feelings that are not just the feelings that are created within this situation. They're amplified. So I feel like the way that this is playing out for you guys is, rather than fighting against the blockade that's in front of you, it's actually a better idea to find a weak spot, to find a way around it, to climb over it, rather than trying to beat this big stone wall down. At least that's how I visualize it for you guys. As we get into on Thursday, when the moon moves into Taurus, it moves into a sextile with Mars, which adds to an already existing trine with Saturn. So that becomes a grand sextile for one day. And when we're talking about planets working together for a cause, this is actually very interesting, because with Mars focus continuing to be on this old anger, this old trauma, the moon's focus is on those that support you, and Saturn's focus is on your long-term goals. So I feel like a lot of times there's one of the similarities between the Gemini and, say, an Aquarius like myself, is that we have this tendency to think that um, we should be able to deal with whatever we're going through, whether that is a mental health thing or an emotional health thing or a physical thing. We sort of have convinced ourselves that we don't need support to get through something, which is absolutely not true. We actually really do. And I feel like that's even part of the lesson in some way, is allowing somebody to assist us when we really need it. And I feel like this is what that is all about. It's creating that emotional support, or reaching out for that emotional support to get you through this hump so that you can continue on with your long-term goals, or whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish now. So it's literally at the very end, and then we're moving on, and then things are going to calm down for you guys just a bit. So that's what I have for you guys this week. Moving on to Cancer, Mars enters Cancer right at the very end of the week, and all week long is very much on the cusp. We're getting closer and closer and closer to the cusp of Cancer. So bottom line is that this week we really will start to feel that influence of Mars coming into Cancer. It's a tiny bit terrifying when you think about it, mainly because Cancers are a very nurturing sign. They're a very emotional sign. They can be, in some cases, very, I can't think of the word that I'm trying to use here, sensitive, a very sensitive sign. And an influence like Mars can be very heavy, can be very volatile, can be just a little bit much in some cases. Good news is he's already been retrograde. He should skirt right through. But while he comes into your sign, there's good things and bad things in terms of his influences, especially because even though Cancer is very much focused on self currently right now, with Pallas Athene's influence, that warrior queen influence, where you're fighting for your right to be who you are, Mars anger energy comes in very much focused on our internal trauma. So this is actually a very common thing, really, when we stand up and go, okay, that's it. I'm fighting for myself, and I am no longer going to feel this way anymore. And then all of a sudden, all this old anger comes up, and it feels like all that fighting that you did really was for nothing, because nothing changed, right? The truth is that that's not the case. Something changed in that fight, and one of those things that changed is that now you choose whether or not to wallow in self-pity, or you choose to get up and fight on, despite the anger, despite what is happening around you, you still continue to choose to get up and fight. And it's a hard choice. And some days I choose not to get up and fight. And that's okay, because some days we just don't have any fight in us. The difference is whether or not it's a day or 2 days, a week, a month, a year, 5 years goes by and you still lay in there choosing not to fight. That's when it becomes an issue. Give yourself a break. Always give yourself a break. Just make sure you get back on it again, no matter how difficult it is. Because trust me, oftentimes it really is difficult to get back on that horse again. As Mars is in a square with Neptune, which is in Pisces, and the Sun, which starts off in Pisces the beginning of the week and then moves on into Aries, their focus is very much on career. It's really important that this old anger doesn't get in the way of your career choices currently going on right now. And there's so many different things that we went through as work experiences in the past that can sort of trigger us into fearing that those things are going to happen again. And the truth is that it's highly possible that those things are going to happen again. But my firm belief is always that every situation is a lesson. And if you repeat something that is uncomfortable, it's to help you come up with a different outcome or a solution that works better than the solution that you chose last time. So it's unfortunate when those things come up, but it is also a time for empowerment. It's a time to stand up to your own demons and say, this isn't going to control my decisions anymore. The good news is Mars continues to be in a trine with Saturn, and on Thursday, the moon turns that into a grand sextile, bringing your support system, emotional support system, together with Mars sort of releasing this trauma towards specifically your long-term goals. Now, it seems kind of weird, really, but that is part of your long-term goals. Healing should always be part of your long-term goals. It's not just about what you do. It's not just about how you do it. It's not just about your legacy or who you're known for. Part of that journey is and always is healing. And I feel like as human beings in general, we tend to overlook that a lot. Cancers, on the other hand, they know that they can't overlook that. They know the impact that it has on them. Knowing that makes it really difficult to accept the choice to not fight on, if that makes sense, unless you need to take a break, which is totally fine. All of that being said, Mars is not necessarily going to be difficult the whole time that he is in your sign. But as he's coming into Cancer and leaving Gemini, it's those planet interactions that we're walking away from that make it just a little bit difficult as he's coming in. We are going to get ready for a little bit of adventure with him because Mars is also a fantastic energy towards all kinds of wonderful things. So looking forward to that. And that's what I have for you guys this week. Moving on to Leo, focus continues to be on intellect, specifically how you process information and how you think about things. We continue to have the Lilith or dark moon's influence this week as well, bringing an element of the past into what influences the way you think in some cases. Her influence is very much on how you think at the beginning of the week as she's moving retrograde backwards through your sign. And as she moves into direct motion right at the end, oh no, I'm sorry, she is still retrograde all the way through the week. So she brings, all of a sudden sneaks this element of the past in that sort of shows you some of the roots of the programming of why you think the way that you do, if that makes sense. And I think that a lot of us walk around thinking that we know who programmed us. We know for sure, that this person did this and that person did this. But a lot of us would also be very surprised to know that sometimes the little situations that we didn't really feel had a lot of significance are part of that programming also. And I feel like this may be something that comes up for you guys specifically. The Lilith is retrograde, while her wild need to completely destroy everything in order to change it energy is retrograded, which means it's almost as if you can't change it. And when we're focused on the past, well, this is, of course, an influence that we have no control over and can't change. So it makes perfect sense. However, we can't change the situation. We can't change what happened. We can change what we do with that information. So if you're looking at intellectual patterns that you have, for instance, a good example of that would be overthinking. When you're making a decision, you're overthinking it too much, so much that you can't make the decision. By understanding some of the roots of why you think in that way will help you to unplug or disconnect from that past experience that no longer has relevance to now. And by doing so, when you start to have that type of thought process again, you can be aware of it and change it. And the more you're active with that, the more you can sort of not 100% eliminate that thought process, but put it on the back burner. Usually our positive thought process is on the back burner. What we're trying to do is switch the pots around so that the one that should have prominence, the one that's helpful to you, does have prominence. So I feel that this is something that's really going to be coming up for you guys this week. It is not so much the fact that you have the thought patterns, but that when you identify where it comes from, it could surprise you. I mean, there's been a lot of instances with inner child stuff where I had no idea that would have an effect on my development in some way, whether it's emotionally, mentally, or spiritually, but it did. It had a huge impact for various different reasons that I wasn't thinking of. And it was kind of like a wow, just like an eye opener for me, that I really didn't see coming, if that makes sense. And I feel like this is very much something that's going to be happening for you guys this week. So that's what I have for you guys this week. Moving on to Virgo, focus continues to be on the home this week, and Ceres is moving her way back into Virgo this week as well, because she is retrograde. Ceres is known as the Great Mother, so she has a very nurturing maternal influence. And in retrograde, what's very interesting about Ceres in retrograde is that whenever there's a retrograde, you're mirroring that back at yourself. And so I really feel that what this means for you Virgos this week, with no other planets coming in to influence your sign this week, I feel like this is an opportunity for you, if you're making changes in your home, reorganizations in your home, improvements in your home, that it is definitely a time for you to make sure that you're reflecting those changes or making those changes based on your own personal needs. A lot of times we're focused on what our family needs, what will make it easier to function for the family. It's always about somebody else. And when it comes to, say a lot of ladies deal with this, but I'm sure there's gentlemen out there too. When it comes to buying gadgets and things like that for the kitchen, we're actually justifying doing that because we're taking care of others. So this week is really about bringing something in for you, whether that is something that is creative and artistic, whether that's something that you have wanted for a really long time, whether it's a self-care thing, it doesn't matter. This is about making sure that as you are adding these improvements, that you are on that list for the reasons why those improvements are there also, and that you don't put yourself on the back burner because other people in the household have needs as well. Of course they do, and it's one thing to take care of those people, of course, but who's going to take care of you if you don't take care of you? That's always the question that you need to ask yourself. So this week really is about incorporating something that nurtures you into your systems. Whether it's your getting ready systems, whether it's your cooking systems, doesn't really matter. As long as you are nurturing yourself while you're creating, that's really all that matters. So that's what I have for you guys this week. And we're moving on to Libra. Focus is on those you love. Although Ceres in retrograde also brings that focus of the home into prevalence this week as well. Ceres is a very maternal influence, a very nurturing influence. When you have a retrograde, we're reflecting that influence back at ourselves in some way. And I feel like Libras being known as martyrs, they're known as martyrs because they don't nurture themselves often. Most Libras that I know put everybody else first and themselves dead last, and very often don't necessarily give themselves the nurturing that they require. They expect it from all the people that they've put that energy into. And of course, it doesn't always work like that. In a perfect world, maybe we don't live in one. So most of the time, it doesn't work that way. This week, I feel that it's really important that Ceres is sort of taking the focus off of those you love. Even though your main focus is on those you love, Ceres is kind of putting that focus back into the home, and in some cases back on self in a way. And I feel that this week really what is important here is that you have a lot of systems set up in terms of care of everybody else and how the household runs and the efficiency of how the household runs and all of those things. But I feel it's really important this week to make sure that there are things that are implemented in there for your own nurturing, for your own amusement. Even it's a word I kept saying that's not the word, but it kept coming up. So your own amusement is self-care. Making sure that you have these systems in place for your own self-care, be it your mental health care, your emotional, your physical, what have you, is really important. And I feel that this is one of the biggest lessons that most Libras will ever learn in their lives, is the value of self-care and just how important putting yourself first every now and then really is. A lot of us have grown up with this: if you put yourself first, it's selfish mentality, and that's not true. If you put yourself before everybody else all the time, then that is absolutely selfish, and that is definitely behavior that's not necessarily going to be helpful to you. But there has to be balance, and you're Libras, so the word balance is always important. You have to balance your time that you put into others and the balance of time that you put into yourself and your own self-care. You have to have a balance between hard work and fun play, and creating that balance this week, I feel, is really very much on the top of the list of focuses this week, because you've already seen that putting yourself on the back burner is not necessarily helpful to you. Now let's take a look at what it looks like to put yourself on the front burner. So that's what I have for you guys this week. Moving on to Scorpio, focus continues to be on your day-to-day schedule throughout the week. And as we move into the week, we sort of move into an in-between focus place, which, if I'm not mistaken, we've been in before recently. So you get another chance again, which is actually kind of cool. It's like a wild card moment, where you just focus on whatever you want to focus on, kind of a thing, or whatever's important to you at the time. In terms of focus on your day-to-day schedule with no planets coming in to influence this at all this week, I feel like this is actually a really good time to take a look at your schedule and specifically fix some of the parts of your schedule that maybe either no longer serve you, or in terms of eliminating those things out of your schedule, or creating space for something new. I really feel that one of the curses of fixed signs, honestly, is that we have a tendency to just keep doing the same thing over and over, day in, day out, constantly doing the exact same thing we did yesterday. And while we don't necessarily feel the boredom of that right away, after a while, it can get pretty difficult to get up and face the same thing every single day. So I really feel that it's important this week to find time in your schedule to incorporate something new, whether it's something you've never done before or something that maybe you used to do a lot of, but you just haven't really had time recently. And you don't obviously have to make time every single day for it. Look at your week and give yourself a couple of hours of doing something that's a little bit out of the ordinary, specifically something that brightens your mood and makes you feel good. We have to have a balance in everything. All work and no play, as we always knew, made Johnny a dull boy. We don't want to be dull boys or dull girls. We want to be happy and well-rounded individuals. And doing fun things really has a very important place in being happy and well-rounded individuals. We can't just focus on work and our responsibilities all the time. In fact, I really feel that many of you this week will get to that point where you almost want to self-destruct all over everything because you just have you can't take it anymore. You can't take doing the same routine over and over and over again. And when I say the self-destruct, that's usually that point where we make these rash decisions, do something completely out of the box that may not be in our best interest. So I feel the better thing to do before we get to that point is to start putting those practices in place now when we're starting to feel a little bit bored. And by doing this, you can avoid the absolute breakdown because you just can't take it anymore. As we get towards the end of the week and our focus basically is in between focuses, it gives us an opportunity also. I really feel for you guys that this brings you an opportunity to explore some new things. Not exactly something that fixed signs like to do, but for Scorpios, even being fixed signs, I feel that's really important, because if you don't explore new things and new experiences, what tends to happen is you just kind of feel like you're never really doing anything. And when you feel like you're never really doing anything, it really does have an emotional influence over you overall. And we also want to avoid that as well. So a trip to the water, you're a water sign after all. I know most of you connect with water. A trip to the water, a trip to someplace you've never been. You know what? Anything works as long as it makes you happy. And that's really what's important this week. So that's what I have for you guys this week. And we're moving on to Sagittarius. Focus continues to be on relationships at the beginning of the week. And as we move through the week, we kind of sort of move in between focuses also, at least until the end of the week, where we start to move into a focus on our day-to-day schedule here. There's a couple of things I feel are really important with those two things sort of playing into it this week. We have no planets coming into Sagittarius this week at all. So we have no planets to influence what is going on specifically. I feel like two things are coming up. One, it's really important, I feel, to make time in your schedule for people when you can. And I feel like this is coming up because we all are in that space where things are just crazy. You're working, you got families to take care of, you have all these errands you have to run and responsibilities that you have. All these things sort of play into life, and it's very easy to let things like one-on-one time within your relationship sort of slip through the cracks because you just never have time for it. This week is one of those moments I feel that it's really important that when you are putting your schedule together, that you add that time, connection time with those around you, whether it's your kids, your spouse, your parents, your siblings, your good friends, it doesn't matter. I feel that we all go through those instances where we realize it's been months before we've talked to any of the people that we love outside of the people that we see on a regular basis. So I feel that that is something that really plays into things for you guys this week. The other thing is I really feel that as you're sort of find yourself in between focuses, sort of at the beginning or the middle of the week, it sort of gives you an opportunity to explore some of the ideas that you sort of put on the back burner. Um, Certain things that maybe you've wanted to do, you have goals that are set up, you just haven't been able to start them yet. This is actually a really good opportunity to revisit some of those ideas to see if there is a way for you to be able to implement at least one of those into what you're doing currently right now. By doing this, it just continues to keep you growing and moving forward in a way that continues to stretch you, continues to help you grow and learn and build the individual that you want to build. So exciting things, actually, I feel happening for you guys. And that's what I have for you guys this week. And we're going to move on to Capricorn. Focus is on, well, continues to be on finances a little bit as we move into focus on relationships as well. Interestingly enough, we can look at this as our relationship to money, and it's always good to revisit your relationship to money and make sure that the relationship continues to be a healthy relationship. Believe it or not, that can always change. But we do still have Pluto's influence just a little bit. Now, don't get excited when I tell you this because it's very short-lived, but Pluto is officially out of Capricorn this week. Not that that matters. It's still on the cusp, so you still feel the influence. And I say, don't get excited because it's going to go retrograde here in a few weeks, and then it's going to come back anyway. So Capricorn is nowhere near ending its time with Pluto, but you are getting breaks a little bit, which is nice. This week, Pluto is very much 0 degrees in Aquarius. So it is technically not in Capricorn, but because it's on the cusp, it still has a very heavy influence. And Pluto's influence is on finances in a grand sextile with the moon, specifically on Thursday, as well as right at the end of the week. And at the end of the week, we're looking at a grand sextile with the moon as well as the sun. The sun is very much focused on career, and then the moon is focused on support. Specifically, we're talking emotional support. So I feel that the way that this sort of plays into what you're doing right now is bringing in emotional reasons why it's very important that your financial security systems are in place for various different emotional reasons. Obviously, we're looking at it in an emotional level in terms of taking care of our own retirement, for example, but also taking care of our life insurance, making sure that our end of life things are also taken care of so that our family doesn't have to be the one to do it. It's about taking care of these responsibilities and making sure that you have those responsibilities taken care of and put in place. But also, it has a lot to do with change and changing the amount of money that seems to be coming in right now. And that's where the sun's influence in your career really has an influence. It's providing opportunities for you this week for advancement. And the moon coming in, bringing that emotional support into that is very helpful, because it also shows that it's very possible that you're not doing this on your own, that there's actually somebody that comes in and says, hey, there's an opening, you should try it out, let's go do that, kind of a thing. So you're not necessarily doing it completely on your own, but there are definitely some really good opportunities popping up for you guys this week because of the way that these things are set up, and in terms of Pluto's interaction with other people. All very, very positive interaction, except for Thursday, when the moon moves into a square with Pluto. And the moon is still focused on your support system. So you kind of feel on Thursday that you're not getting any support. And then by Friday, it turns out that you really are being supported even more than you could possibly imagine. So keep in mind, these things change on a dime also. And, sometimes, one day you're just not seeing somebody in a way, they're not having a great day. That happens to everybody, right? But by the time they get to Friday, they've gotten over their problem and they're ready to be there and support you. So that's what I have for you guys this week. And we are moving on to Aquarius. And what do I have for you, Aquarius? Well, I will tell you what I have for you. I have Pluto, which has officially moved into Aquarius. Now, let's not freak out, because, of course, it's going to go retrograde and go back into Capricorn. And this is going to happen a lot over the next few years. But this is our first taste of Pluto for the next 25 years. Okay. Because he's there for a really long time. So, actually, in terms of what we're dealing with Pluto, it's not too bad. Focus is on finances. At least Pluto brings that focus of finances into the sign this week. Aquarius's focus is still very much on long-term goals. And Saturn, while is still on the cusp, has officially moved 1 degree into Pisces. So we're moving out of that cusp. So his influence is there, but it's a very faint influence, if that makes sense. Pluto is interacting in very good ways with other planets, which is good, with the exception of Thursday, when the moon moves into a square with Pluto. And the moon, the moon's influence is on our support system. We're looking specifically at emotional support. And I feel with the focus on finances, there's a couple of things that may actually be coming out of this for you guys. One of those is in terms of relationships and finances and multiple people having to be responsible for the finances. That could bring up a lot of arguments about how finances are supposed to be done or where the money's coming from. I'm an Aquarius personally. That's actually been a thing for a while in my world. Not exactly thrilled to see that it's really going to come up here this month. The other thing I feel is that in terms of financial goals, you may find yourself in a situation where you're feeling like you don't have support from others for those long-term goals. And that's never a comfortable place to be. But you also have to understand why that happens. Sometimes that just happens because the person doesn't quite understand where you're coming from, or doesn't quite understand what the end result is. And especially if it affects them, they're going to have a skewed view of what it is that you're trying to do. As we move into the end of the week, when the moon moves into a grand sextile with Pluto as well as the sun, and there's a little bit of influence with Neptune there, both planets are focused on your career goals, and the moon continues to be focused on emotional support. So now we're taking this into a little bit of a different direction and gaining the support that looked like was missing just a couple of days ago. It is true. It has to be said that Aquarians, while we are good communicators, don't always get the point across the first time because people don't always understand where we're coming from. And that's okay. In a way, we're intellectually just a little bit off or a little bit different than everybody else. So sometimes we have to work or find a different way of saying it or whatever in order for people to understand where we're coming from. So don't give up on them when they don't understand where you're coming from. Give them another couple of chances. Sometimes we communicate the way our brains work, which is all over the damn place. And it's amazing that anybody could keep up with that, including us sometimes when you think about it. So that's what I have for you guys this week. And finally, we are going to move into Pisces. Focus is on career. Focus is on the end of Pisces. We start off the week with just a couple of days in Pisces, and then the sun moves on to Aries, so we are losing that influence, but we are gaining Saturn's influence as Saturn, of course, is moving into Pisces. Well, Saturn has already moved into Pisces. We're just moving farther into Pisces. We're going to kick off the week with the moon in Pisces in a conjunction with Saturn, which Saturn is in a trine with Mars pretty much throughout the entire week. And the moon's influence in that just sort of amplifies that a little bit. A trine is actually a very helpful aspect where two planets are working together. And with Saturn's influence on long-term goals and Mars' influence on our inner trauma, doesn't really sound very promising when you think about it. But this really has to do with releasing old anger towards situations that just don't make sense for right now in terms of what you're doing. So when we're talking about long-term goals, we are talking about goals that you have tried to set up before that you did not were not successful at, didn't follow through with, and those old problems that existed with that goal are still sort of worrying you now as you're trying to set this up now. You have to cut the ties with what happened before in order to be able to explore what's going to happen now. And so this is really why this is coming up. And it's coming up for really good reasons. You release this stuff and it no longer influences your decisions. It becomes clearer and much easier to see what it is that you need to do in order to achieve those goals. Also, we have Neptune, which is still very much focused on career. Neptune is in a square with Mars. So we have something that's very helpful with Mars, and then we have a square with Mars. And while this seems like almost the exact same thing, we have career goals. This old anger is getting in the way. We're also looking at our future goals, and this old anger is getting in the way. We need to nip it in the bud on both sides, right? So when we're talking about career specifically, what we really want to pay attention to is that we're not allowing that trigger to react in that professional situation. Obviously, if you have past trauma around, say, somebody telling you what to do, you can't go up to your boss and tell him he's a great big poopy head for telling you what to do. That is going to result in you losing your job, right? That's just really not going to work. So these triggers are coming up, and the issue here is that we need to work through our triggers and not let our triggers work us. The minute the trigger has control over your reactions, you're not going to react well, and the result of that is not necessarily going to be something that is helpful to you. So the moon makes all of this a little bit more emotional the first few days of the week, and then it moves on out into Aries. Also, we're looking at Tuesday, and we have a new moon on Tuesday, which is very interesting, actually. The first 4 new moons of the year were on cusps. So we have the sun and the moon in conjunction right on the cusp of Pisces and Aries this month. And if you're trying to manifest something specifically in your career, this is a fantastic time to do it by using that new moon energy, because you have not just your Pisces influence energy, but you have this fiery, wonderful, new Aries energy that you can manifest with as well. And it just adds a new awesome layer to everything that you're doing. So that's what I have for you guys this week. And that is what I have for everybody. Thanks for hanging out and checking out the horoscopes. I'm Melissa Bruce, the heavy metal psychic. I will catch you guys again next week. Hey, make it a great week, everybody.